Hey, warm and friendly hello! Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Heaps with myself, Greg Heaps Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you. Joining me in segment number 2, one of our good friends, Curtis Rogers. He does such tremendous work over at 710 Seattle Sports. He's going to be along with me, and we're going to be taking a look at where Gonzaga goes from here now that Steele Venters is out for the entirety of the season. Couple of that, we're going to be taking a look at the year 1 to year 2 bump. We're going to be taking a look at it in terms of a few of these transfers. We're going to also look at it from freshman to sophomore campaign, and couple of that, we've got to take a look at some of these coaches going from year 1 to year 2 as well. So we're going to be chatting about that and so much more, and we did see a few pieces of news in college basketball over the last 48 hours. Reason why it's the last 48 hours is because I had a conference preview of the Sun Belt yesterday. Wouldn't have it any gosh darn way. Being able to talk Sun Belt basketball in August, a tradition unlike any other, but that was done yesterday, so we are going to be polishing up the pieces of news that we've seen in college basketball over the last few days here on this segment. And if you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at Juden_D1. Keep in mind, letters CM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. The other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And we did see a pair of moves for teams that are a little bit smaller, and we're noticing this more and more. We should be seeing more teams in the coming days that are out there in like the SWAC, the MEAC, conferences like this, announcing some of their moves, as we did see Matthew Robinson. He was over at the NAIA level, just was unable to stay healthy, only played a combined 27 games in 2 seasons over at Florida National, but in those 27 games over the last 2 years, averaged about 15.5 points, 3.5 boards, 2.5 assists, 37% three-point shooter. He's going to be heading on over to Chicago State. For Chicago State, losing their coach in Gerald Gillian, that is a rough break for them, to say the least, and I do think that it's going to be a rough season for them. Year number 1 out in the NEC, but for Chicago State, certainly this is going to be able to help them out a little bit, as they do have to pick up the pieces from losing their coach in Gerald Gillian, but they've done a nice job being able to bring in guys from the NAIA level. In the past, they've got Noble Crawford, Quincy Allen, who are going to be in the fold for this team, and Deshaun Jean Charles is someone that's 6'7", has a little bit of versatility. So I do think that Chicago State, because the NEC is, let's go, and it's not necessarily amazing, they have a chance to be able to be actually halfway decent out there this season, and certainly what Gerald Gillian was able to do for the Chicago State team, a team that was literally the armpit of all of college basketball, that's going to be able to help them out moving forward. And then for Alcorn State, Marcus Tankersley is going to be joining them. He was over at Detroit Mercy last season, and as we know, for Detroit Mercy, things were not so great for them, and it's going to be a question of, was Marcus Tankersley's production because the team was just so bad that someone had to get points, or was he just a good player on an incredibly sad and sorry team? But for Tankersley, was able to put up 16.5 points last season as the number 2 scorer for this team, shot about 28% from 3-point range, has never necessarily been the world's greatest 3-point shooter, but chipped in there about 4 rebounds, 2.2 assists per contest at 6'4", has a little bit of versatility. Previous year over at Detroit was very much glued to the bench, so we'll see if that year 1 to year 2 bump was just because of a massive downgrade in the level of play on the team and just overall talent to prevent him from getting minutes or not. But that should be a solid pickup for an Alcorn State team that has been very rock solid out in the SWAC. They have been in the top 3 in the regular season each of the last 3 seasons, and for Alcorn State, they did a pretty solid job being able to add in a few guys in the offseason. I think that Therese Elliott is going to be able to come in. He's going to be able to have some production right away after he was over at North Carolina A&T last season. You've got a guy in Julian Lull, who he's got some size. He was over at Arkansas State a season ago. Going to be an interesting little blend, as Landon Busey feels like every single year has had a little bit of a different style with Alcorn State that has been able to work for them. Doesn't necessarily work outside the conference, but in conference, Alcorn State has been a pretty solid team, typically without that main alpha dog scorer. Should remain the same here, but Tankersley should be able to add to a backcourt that really doesn't have a lot of guys that are go-to scorers. So that's what we have seen in college basketball over the last 48 hours, and coming next, we have seen quite a bit happen out in the great state of Washington this offseason, and Gonzaga hit with the loss of Steele Venters. Where do they go from here? And how do we take a look at the year one to year two bump with some of these players and coaches? We're going to be talking about that with Curtis Rogers next, right here on Gonzaga Hoops with myself, Greg Hughes Peterson, now a part of the Decent Family Podcast. And we're back to lovely Las Vegas for Gonzaga Hoops with myself, Greg Hughes Peterson, now part of the Decent Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by this man, Curtis Rogers. He does such a tremendous job over at 710 Seattle Sports, taking a look at so many different things, whether that be college basketball, as he covers it all 12 months of the year, much like myself, whether that be the NFL as the Seattle Seahawks. They're going to be back in a matter of days. He's gassed up, ready to go there. The Seattle Mariners, as they look to claw their way back into the playoff race as well, and so much more. And you're able to follow him on Twitter/X at a kid from Kent. That's also his Instagram handle as well. And Curtis, always great to get you aboard. Thank you.
Greg, always happy to join you here on the podcast. And yeah, the mornings are a little crisper, which means we're getting closer to fall, which means we're getting closer to the start of college basketball season. I'm hyped. I'm ready for it. I say we fast forward to October, November, get these games going. But unfortunately, we got to wait a little bit longer before the season starts. But still, storylines abound, especially up here in the Northwest.
Oh, there certainly are. And the biggest storyline right now, the man of steel, Steele Venters. We were both thinking that he was going to have a nice season for Gonzaga. Well, he goes down with an injury. He is done for the second straight year, which it's just so unfortunate. But where does the team go from here without having Steele Venters? Because I do feel like if there is a team that's able to absorb a loss like this, it is Gonzaga.
It is. They have tremendous depth, and I think they definitely have enough depth on the wing. I think Michael Ajayi, the addition of him is going to be even more important, especially because it looked like Venters was going to be a starter if he were going to play in the 24-25 season. Unfortunately, that's just not going to happen now. Second straight year he misses. They do have enough depth on the wing. Dusty Stromer is still there. I think this Gonzaga team is still one of the handful of teams that I would consider for a national championship this season. I don't think this derails them by any stretch of the imagination for their ultimate goal. It's just going to make it a little bit more difficult, especially once you get to March, especially once you're playing all these teams that have tremendous talent in their first about 8 players or so. So I think Gonzaga losing him over the course of this upcoming season doesn't necessarily, throw a wrench in their national title hopes. It's just going to make it that much tougher. I think it'll be mostly felt in the non-conference, especially when you're going with, 9-10-man rotations earlier in the season. Everybody trims it down come the end of the year. Now you can't really go as deep as you want to go early in the season. So I kind of wonder what their legs are going to look like at the end of the year when it's just one less trusted name you can go to. But yeah, you really feel for Steele Venters, second straight year. It's an Achilles injury this time. It was an ACL injury last year. So I guess that is a little encouraging in that it's 2 separate injuries, but you never know how a guy is going to be if he does choose to come back after this. I think his 7th year of eligibility, if I'm not mistaken, if he does return in 25-26, but that's at a different time. But hey, Miami of Florida's got a tight end who's got 9 years of eligibility. So anything is possible in today's college athletic world.
Yep, absolutely. There's always that meme of it's like, there's people that go to college for like 7 years. I think that it was one of those Chris Farley movies. I think it was Tommy Boy. And then David Spade goes, well, those are doctors. So I guess we're going to be having to call Steele Venters Dr. Venters when he comes back. As Curtis Rogers, he does great work over at 710 Seattle Sports. He's joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops. But I think the biggest question I have is, do you think that for Braden Smith, who's going to be coming over from Colgate, he's a top flight scorer for them, he was planning to redshirt before this. Do you think that that's still going to be the plan for Gonzaga?
I don't know if they're going to be able to redshirt him, especially because of this injury. I think that would be a depth move that I think they kind of have to consider now. In a perfect world, yeah, you'd put a redshirt on him, you stash him for next year, get him, up to speed on the game that Gonzaga plays in the WCC, especially coming over from a smaller school. Anytime you make that jump from a school like Colgate, from a school that is not considered one of the Power 5, Group of 5, Group of 4 now, I guess, minus the Pac-12 schools, then yeah, you're going to need a little bit more seasoning. You're going to need a little bit more just to get up to speed on things. In a perfect world, yes, you're able to redshirt Braden Smith, but I don't think they're going to have that luxury this season. They may try it. They may try to redshirt him earlier in the season, but I think if they want to have the freshest legs possible come NCAA tournament time, come WCC tournament time, you're going to need as many horses ready to go, and he's one of them. I get that, you want to be able to have him get up to speed rather than just throw him into the fire. But again, I don't think they're going to have that luxury this season.
Yep, I don't think so either, though. Depth is still relatively good. K-Leaf Battle coming over is going to be able to help out with that. They have a lot of returning talent in the backcourt as well, and I think that that's the biggest key for Gonzaga in this day and age where the transfer portal really just eats teams alive. Being able to have those guys that were in the backcourt last season, I think, is big because you know as well as I do, Ryan Nembhard was a completely different player in the second half of the season rather than the first half, and now having another full offseason under his belt, and other teams like Gonzaga, it's not just exclusive to Gonzaga, having these transfers back for season number 2, I think it's going to be a big leap for them.
Oh, yeah. You look at Gonzaga's backcourt right now, the starting backcourt of Ryan Nembhard and Nolan Hickman. I mean, we've been talking about these guys for years, and I think that Gonzaga's backcourt is going to be a big reason why they're in the national title picture. You mentioned Ryan Nembhard. I mean, he came to Gonzaga with all sorts of fanfare, coming off that triple-double performance he had for Creighton in the NCAA tournament the year prior. Got up to a slower start last year, but like you said, as the year went along, found his footing, got really comfortable in that offense, and by the end of the year was a huge difference maker for them. Nolan Hickman, a former 4.5, 5-star recruit out of high school from the Seattle area. People have always had huge expectations for them. His progress hasn't necessarily been linear in the college game, but he is, I think, a very steady presence to have when you're talking about a guy who's a 3-4 year player in college basketball. I mean, like you said, in this NIL era, you're seeing guys stay longer in college. And I think that is going to be good for development of some of these players like Nolan Hickman, who I imagine pre-NIL probably would have jumped a little earlier at the pro game, especially because of the dollars and cents that were being thrown around with guys, playing in Europe, playing in the G League, what have you. But now you can make that money at the college level, still continue to develop. And I mean, you're going to have better facilities at a lot of these college programs than you would playing in the G League than you would playing over in Europe somewhere. So I think it is great for Gonzaga. It's great for the development of those two guys in their backcourt. I think Nembhard and Hickman make up, I would say probably right now, probably the top 10 backcourt in all of college basketball. I mean, those two guys are just rock solid, and Gonzaga is lucky to have both of them for another year, especially in a year where I think we can very much say the Final Four is a very reasonable expectation for the Zags bunch.
Yep, I totally agree with you. Despite the fact that Steele Venters is going to be out for this season, I think that for Gonzaga, they should be looking at, no doubt, getting back to the Sweet 16, which I think they've done in 8 straight NCAA tournaments. But on top of that, to your point, being able to perhaps make that Final Four run. As joining me on the show, we do have Curtis Rogers, who does such tremendous work over at 710 Seattle Sports. And is there a team in particular that you're looking at that does bring back a lot of production? Because we were talking about with Gonzaga, they're a top 10 team in the country in terms of returning minutes from a season ago. Are there a few other ones that you've got a little bit of a star around that you want to see for this upcoming season and might be feeling a little bit bullish on?
One team that I'm intrigued by is the Cal Golden Bears under Mark Madsen, head coach, because I thought he made some good strides in year one and just kind of building off of that. But it's going to be weird because now they're playing in the ACC. The ACC is not the Pac-12, and Cal is a team that I think you could definitely make into a winner. You're in a very fertile recruiting ground. Mark Madsen understands that, having played his college ball at Stanford, having been in the NBA. I mean, this is a guy that has a resume that a lot of teams should have jumped at when he was available. Hint, hint, his alma mater, Stanford. But I think Stanford's in a good situation now with Kyle Smith. But Cal is an interesting one to me because I think they just have a lot of good momentum. They have a coach that seems to care right now, which has not been the case, I think, in about the last decade or so with the Cal Golden Bears, whether it was Wyking Jones, whether it was Mark Fox. I mean, that Cal basketball program really, really forgot that they, could be competitive for about a decade or so. So I like that Mark Madsen has kind of instilled a belief in that program again. And I think West Coast hoops are better, and there's good Bay Area hoops. And I think with Mark Madsen, Cal, with Kyle Smith at Stanford, I think this rivalry could really improve here over the last couple of years. It's been dormant in terms of basketball hatred over the last however long it's been. It's been a while since both schools have really mattered in college basketball, but I'm excited to see what Mark Madsen can do in year two. He's a guy that I am really excited for. Now, navigating those ACC waters, especially when you are touching Pacific Ocean waters. That is not an easy task in this new college basketball landscape we're in. The travel is going to be just absolutely insane for them. But you know what? Hopefully they can manage to make things happen, because I think good things are in store for that program over the next couple of years.
Oh, I think so as well. And I do think that they made the right hire last offseason. And those teams that go from year one to year two of a coach, I think are very important to key in on as well, because we do see a few teams like Iowa State did a few seasons ago where they take a big giant leap up. We saw that with Missouri with Dennis Gates, and then in year two, they did not win a single game out in the SEC. But how do you take a look at these programs that are now in year two under a new coach? Because you were just alluding to one in Cal that I think they did a nice job there, and I think that they're going to be able to take some leaps forward. But are there a few other year two coaches that you take a look at and you feel like now that they're getting in a few more of their guys that they might be able to take a nice step forward?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the second year being so important. And I mean, in this day and age, when you are able to hit the fast forward button through the transfer portal, through NIL, you can get your guys in really quickly. You can get your guys in as fast as you could ever do it in the college game. And I think that is going to be so important for a lot of these schools that are, trying to get back to where they used to be. Rick Pitino comes to mind at St. John's. That is a program. They weren't as down as Cal was. I mean, Cal was god awful. They were so bad for a number of years, but I think St. John's is another program with Rick Pitino to watch out for. I think they are going to be a school that in that Big East conference, yes, it is a very tough conference year in and year out. They're going to need to be really good this season, and I think Pitino is the guy that can really get his guys in that program. I think that's going to be one to watch over the course of the next season. It's funny because in the olden days of college basketball, you had to wait till probably about year 3, year 4 for most of your guys to be here. I think it's funny because up here in Seattle, year 2 of the Mike Hopkins era was probably his most successful, but it was done with guys that were recruited by Lorenzo Roma. That just would not have happened in today's college basketball world. You had guys like Matisse Thybulle that was still there, who's gone on to have a really long NBA career. You had guys like Jalen Noel, guys who played together for like 3 or 4 years at that time. So it was interesting to see how that era got off to the start of that era got off to. And now you're seeing guys where the roster looks completely different. As an Arizona alum, I mean, Tommy Lloyd was able to get Arizona as a number 2 seed, even though it was not mostly guys of the previous iteration with Sean Miller. So just seeing the vast turnover of programs in college basketball, it's interesting because we used to give head coaches a lot longer leash in terms of implementing their system, getting their players in. But now I would say if you take over a new job and you are not having your team at least in NCAA tournament consideration, I think it's very fair to turn up the pressure. I think it's very fair to turn up the temperature of that hot seat. Not to say that, guys should be fighting for their jobs specifically after year 2, but if you're not seeing linear progression from year 1 to year 2, then year 2 to year 3, especially in this day and age where you can turn over a roster at the drop of a hat, that should be something everybody should be monitoring with all these second-year head coaches, is just how quickly things can turn around.
Yep, and you don't want to be canning like every single second-year coach that doesn't get things turned around. But we all saw what happened with Louisville with the Kenny Payne experiment. I think that it was fair to say that in season number 50, that was not going to be going very well for them. And that was one where it's like, okay, we can move on here. I think that we know exactly what's going down, and we know exactly what goes down every single time you join me, Curtis. A great chat and great knowledge. You do such an amazing job over at 710 Seattle Sports. So let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you, and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, lots going on. It is sports equinox time up here where everything just kind of collides. We've got college football that just started this past weekend, started the NFL season, the end of the baseball season, start of the NHL season, that ramps up, and then college basketball after all of that That's where I'm home, Greg. That's where it is the best to be. And really appreciate you having me on. SeattleSports.com is the place where you want to go for all that content. And then you can download all of my work at Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, wherever it is you get your podcasts. Follow along on Twitter and Instagram at A Kid from Kent. And Greg, always a pleasure talking college hoops with you, no matter the time of year.
Absolutely. And it's always great to be able to get you aboard, Curtis. Curtis does such a tremendous job following the sport all 12 months out of the year and always brings it good. So big thanks, Curtis, for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And if you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at GNN_D1. Keep in mind, letters CM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And we're getting closer and closer to the upcoming college basketball season. Expect the SWAC conference preview to be coming up in the next few days. And I'm going to be doing a conference preview for every one of these conferences. And even though I'm a little bit unsure of where all these podcasts are going to be housed, hopefully it will be continuing with this fine network here at VSiN. I'll be with you guys every single day this year, all 366 days. So I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.